I had driven that mountain road to my lake house every Friday for 11 years. At 11:47 p.m., deep in the fog, my car speakers suddenly came alive. "Don't turn right!" I froze. The GPS screen was black. My phone had no apps open. I wasn't using navigation. Then the voice returned. "Please trust me. Keep driving straight." My hands gripped the wheel. "Who are you?" No answer. 2 minutes later, I saw headlights waiting at the exact turn I always took. And the truth behind that warning shattered everything. Before we go any further, I'm so grateful you're here with me today. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, your city, your state, your country? I want to know who's in this room with me. A quick note. This story contains fictional elements woven in for storytelling and reflection. Names and places are coincidental, but everything it teaches you is worth keeping. I've driven that road to the lake house every Friday night for 11 years. Same route, same trees, same stretch of Blue Ridge Parkway, where the fog rolls in off the mountain, like it owns the place. I know every curve, every pothole, every spot where the deer like to cross just past mile marker 42. But the Friday I'm about to tell you about that was the last time I ever drove it the same way again. Let me take you back to how it started. Not at 11:47 at night when everything went sideways, but earlier. 6 o'clock in the evening, when I was still standing in my garage, thinking the worst thing I had to worry about was whether I'd packed enough coffee for the weekend. I'm Gerald Whitmore, 68 years old, retired, widowed, and the owner of more property than one man probably needs. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the western edge of Asheville, North Carolina, in the same house Margaret and I built 39 years ago. She passed 4 years back. Breast cancer stage 4, 8 months from diagnosis to the end. The house has been too big ever since. The lake house out on Lake Lure was her idea. She found the property on a Tuesday, called me at work by Wednesday, and by that Friday we were driving out there together to look at it. That was 1989. We were 32 years old and thought we had forever. I've kept going back every Friday since she died, because it's the closest I can get to feeling like she's still around. So that evening I was loading my overnight bag into the back of my SUV when my phone rang. I saw Nadine's name on the screen and answered on the second ring the way I always did. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. "Dad." Her voice was warm, easy. "You heading out tonight?" "Same as always," I told her. "Leaving around 9, maybe 9:30. Blue Ridge Parkway." "Blue Ridge Parkway," I confirmed. "Why, you need something before I go?" No, she said, and I could hear the smile in it. "I just worry about you on those roads at night. The fog's been bad lately." "I've been driving that road since before you were born," I said, laughing a little. She laughed too. It was a good laugh. Easy. The kind of laugh I'd heard my whole life and never once thought twice about. "I know, Dad. I know. Just call me when you get there, okay? So I know you made it." "I always do," I said. We talked for another few minutes. She asked about the furnace I'd mentioned. It had been making a noise and whether I'd called the repair company yet. She asked if I needed her to come by Sunday to help me sort through some of Margaret's old boxes in the spare room. I said maybe next week. We said our goodbyes the way we always did, easy and warm, and I slipped my phone into my shirt pocket and finished loading the car. I pulled out of the driveway at 9:17. The drive starts pretty enough. Merriman Avenue to the interstate ramp, then you cut west toward the mountains, and the city lights fade behind you. By the time you reach the parkway entrance, civilization feels about 100 miles away, even though it's only been 20 minutes. The trees close in on both sides, tall and dark, their bare October branches reaching over the road like cathedral arches. The fog was low that night, crawling along the asphalt in slow, pale ribbons. My headlights cut maybe 40 feet ahead. I had the radio on low, some old Merle Haggard song I only half recognized, and a travel mug of coffee in the cup holder that was already going cold. I wasn't worried. I wasn't nervous. I was tired in the comfortable way you get tired after a full week, the kind of tired that doesn't stop you from doing what you've always done. I was about 22 miles in when the radio cut out. Not a fade, not a crackle, just gone. 1 second, Merle Haggard, the next second, nothing but the hum of the engine and the sound of my tires on wet pavement. I glanced at the console. The display was still lit, station still showing, but no sound coming through. I reached over and turned the volume knob. Nothing. Huh, I said out loud the way you do when something minor goes wrong, and you're alone in a car at night. I tapped the display screen. It flickered once and went back to normal, still showing the station still silent. I figured it was just a signal dead zone. Happens out here. I let it go. Then, at 11:47, I know the exact time, because I glanced at the dashboard clock half a second before it happened. The speakers came back to life. But it wasn't Merle Haggard. It was a voice. Clear, calm, female. The kind of measured, unhurried tone you might expect from a GPS system, except cleaner, somehow more deliberate. And what it said stopped my hands cold on the wheel. Don't turn right. I hit the brakes harder than I needed to. The SUV shuddered, tires barking against the wet asphalt, and I pulled instinctively to the shoulder. My heart was hammering. I sat there with both hands gripping the wheel and looked down at the center console. The GPS screen was black, completely dark. I hadn't turned it on. I never turned it on for this drive. I knew this road better than I knew my own backyard. I grabbed my phone from my shirt pocket. Locked screen, no notifications, no apps open, no Bluetooth audio playing, nothing. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the engine idle and my own breathing and absolutely nothing else. What in the world? I whispered. I unlocked my phone and checked again. No GPS app, no navigation running, no voice assistant active. I checked the car's built-in system through the center console menu, no active connections, no audio source selected. By every indication, the car's infotainment system could give me nothing was running. I laughed a little, the kind of laugh that doesn't mean you think something is funny. I put the car back in drive. I told myself it was a glitch. Some kind of interference, maybe. I'd had the software updated at the dealership 3 weeks back, and maybe something hadn't seated right. It happened. I signaled left, checked my mirrors, and pulled back onto the parkway. The fog ahead was thicker now. The trees on either side pressed close and the road curved gently to the right. About a quarter mile ahead, the same right turn I'd taken 600 times, the one that would put me on the faster route, down toward Lake Lure. I was doing 38 miles an hour when the speakers came back on. Please trust me. A pause. Then, keep going straight, Gerald. My foot went to the brake again. The car slowed. My hands didn't move from the wheel, but every muscle in my arms went rigid. It knew my name. I sat there on that dark mountain road, with the fog curling around my headlights and the engine ticking quietly, and I tried to think of a single rational explanation for what had just said my name through my car speakers when nothing in that car was supposed to be on. I couldn't find one. Up ahead, the right turn waited. Familiar. Dark. The same road I'd taken every Friday for 11 years. I didn't take it. I don't know exactly why. Some instinct, maybe. Something quieter and older than logic that said when something you can't explain tells you not to go somewhere, you don't go there. I pressed the accelerator and kept going straight onto the narrower service road that curved away from the parkway and down toward Mills River. And in my rearview mirror, just before the trees swallowed the view behind me, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A pair of headlights, sitting perfectly still at the exact spot where I should have turned. Not moving, not pulling out. Just there in the dark like they'd been waiting. I didn't look at that rearview mirror for long. Something in my gut told me not to. The same something that had made me keep my foot on the gas instead of turning right 30 seconds earlier. I pressed down harder and put distance between me and whatever was sitting at that intersection, and I focused on the road ahead, the narrow service road that curved down through the trees toward Mills River. My hands were steadier than they had any right to be. I'm a practical man. I spent 40 years building a real estate portfolio from the ground up, negotiating contracts, reading people, solving problems. I don't spook easily, but there is something uniquely unsettling about a voice saying your name in a dark, empty car when every piece of technology in that car should be completely silent. It gets under your skin in a way that's hard to shake off, no matter how sensible you think you are. I tried my phone first. I held it up and checked the signal bar. Nothing. Not even one bar. The parkway drops connectivity in patches, especially along the ridgeline at night, and this stretch was one of the dead zones. No calling out. I set the phone back in the cup holder and tried the car's built-in display instead, scrolling through the menu to find the active audio source. Nothing was running. No Bluetooth device connected. No app streaming. The system showed a clean slate like the car had never made a sound. Okay, I said aloud, because talking to yourself when you're spooked is something you do whether you admit it or not. Okay, think. The most logical explanation I could come up with was some kind of residual software glitch from the dealership update 3 weeks back. Maybe a test file had been left in the system. Maybe the audio processor had pulled something from a cached voice command and misfired. These things happen with modern cars. They're basically computers on wheels, and computers do strange things sometimes. It was a reasonable explanation. I believed it about 30%. The other 70% was focused on the fact that it had said my name, not a generic prompt, not a system notification. My name, Gerald. Clear as a bell in that calm, even tone, like whoever was speaking had all the time in the world and knew exactly who they were talking to. I drove another mile. The service road was rough under my tires. Gravel patches, uneven asphalt. The kind of road that sees maybe 6 cars a day. The trees on either side were dense here, no streetlights. Just my headlights and the occasional shimmer of fog catching the high beams. I turned the radio on manually, just to fill the silence with something familiar. A country station out of Hendersonville came through, patchy but listenable. I was starting to breathe normally again. Then the radio died for the second time. This time I didn't flinch. I just gripped the wheel a little tighter, kept my eyes straight ahead, and waited. Because some part of me already knew what was coming. The voice returned. Softer than before, but somehow more present, like it was right there in the car with me, instead of coming through the speakers. There are people waiting for you on that road, Gerald. A beat of silence. You did the right thing. My throat went dry. The muscles across my shoulders pulled tight enough to hurt. People waiting. Not a glitch. Not a cached file. Not a software misfire. Whatever this was, it knew something specific about what was on that road behind me. I hit the accelerator. Not a panic stomp, but a firm, deliberate push, and the SUV surged forward on the gravel. I needed to get somewhere with lights, somewhere with people. Who are you? I said it out loud, feeling slightly ridiculous and not caring at all. Who is this? No answer. The speakers went quiet again. I drove hard for another 2 miles, my mind running at full speed. I thought about Nadine's phone call earlier that evening, the way she'd asked about my route with such easy, warm concern. The way she'd specifically asked if I was taking the parkway. At the time, it had felt like nothing more than a daughter checking on her father. But sitting in that car on a dark mountain road with an unnamed voice telling me people had been waiting for me at that exact turn, it stopped feeling like nothing. I told myself I was jumping to conclusions. Nadine was my daughter. She had called me every week for years. She brought pastries on Sunday mornings. She helped me sort through Margaret's things. I told myself that, but my foot stayed heavy on the gas. The Mills River checkpoint appeared through the trees without warning. A wash of floodlights cutting through the fog, the outline of a portable traffic barrier, and a single patrol car parked at the edge of the gravel pullout. I slowed down instinctively. A traffic stop this far out this time of night was unusual. Not unheard of, the county ran DUI checkpoints on rural routes occasionally, but unusual enough to make me sit up straighter. I rolled to a stop at the barrier. A uniformed officer stepped out of the patrol car and walked toward my window, one hand raised in the standard slow-down gesture. But before he reached me, someone else stepped out from the other side of the patrol car. Not a police officer. A younger man, maybe 30, in a dark jacket, hands in his pockets. He walked toward my driver's side window with the kind of calm that said he'd been expecting me specifically. I recognized him before he was halfway across the gravel. Declan Marsh, my neighbor from across the street. The kid, though, I suppose 30 isn't really a kid who'd moved into the Hendersons' old place 4 years back, showed up with a U-Haul and no furniture, and spent his first Thanksgiving eating cereal alone until I knocked on his door and dragged him over for dinner. He stopped outside my window, and the expression on his face was one I had never seen on him before. Serious in a way that went all the way down. "Mr. Whitmore," he said. His voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "I'm really glad you listened." I stared at him. My window was already halfway down. The cold night air pushed in, carrying the smell of wet pine and exhaust from the patrol car. "Declan." My voice came out flatter than I intended. "What in the hell is going on?" He glanced at the officer, who gave a small nod, and then looked back at me with the kind of expression a person wears when they're about to say something that changes everything. "I need you to come out of the car," he said quietly. "There's something you have to hear." I sat there for a moment, engine still running, hands still on the wheel. 68 years old, 40 years of reading rooms and reading people. And right then, looking at Declan Marsh standing in the fog outside a rural checkpoint at midnight, I knew with the particular bone-deep certainty of a man who has spent his life paying attention that whatever came next was going to split my life cleanly into before and after. I turned off the engine. I got out of the car. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I stepped away from the SUV. And the cold hit me properly for the first time all night, that sharp October cold that comes off the Blue Ridge after dark, the kind that gets into your lungs and reminds you you're not young anymore. Declan was already walking toward me. The floodlights from the checkpoint threw hard shadows across his face, and I could see how tight his jaw was, how carefully he was holding himself together. "Declan." My voice came out steady, which surprised me. "Start talking, right now." He stopped 2 feet away and looked me dead in the eyes. "Mr. Whitmore, I need you to hear something before I explain anything. Because if I explain first, you're going to argue with me. And we don't have time for that. Son, I just drove 20 miles on a mountain road in the dark because a voice in my car told me not to turn right, and now I'm standing in a gravel lot at midnight looking at my neighbor. My chest was tight, my pulse running harder than I wanted to admit. You'd better give me a reason to stand here instead of calling the police. I am the reason you're not calling the police." Declan reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. His hands were steady, but his eyes weren't. There was something raw in them, something close to fear. "I'm the one who talked to them first. Mr. Whitmore Gerald, please. Just listen to this." He pressed play. The recording was about 40 seconds long. The audio quality was decent, not perfect, a little hollow, like it had been captured from outside through a window or a wall. 2 voices. I recognized both of them before the first sentence was finished, and the recognition hit me like a fist to the sternum. "Nadine and Preston. The timing has to be exact," Preston's voice said. Calm, measured, the way he talked in business meetings. "He leaves between 9 and 11 every Friday. We have a window, and you're sure they know what to do?" Nadine's voice, lower than usual, clipped. "They've driven the route 3 times. The turnoff on the parkway is isolated, no cameras, no lighting. It'll look like he missed the curve in the fog. A pause. It won't be complicated, Nadine. It better not be. Her voice cracked on the last word, not with guilt, I realized, with urgency. Because if this doesn't work, we lose everything. The lawyers are already asking questions about the trust structure. The recording ended. I didn't move. The fog drifted past the floodlights in slow gray curtains. Somewhere in the trees, a branch dropped, with a sound like a gunshot, and I didn't even flinch because I was completely numb from the ears down. That was my daughter's voice, talking about missing a curve in the fog, talking about me, Gerald. Declan's voice was gentle in a way I hadn't heard from him before. I know what you're feeling right now. No. The word came out harder than I intended. My eyes were burning. Not tears, not yet just that pressure that builds behind them when your body doesn't know what to do with something. No, you don't. You can't. I pressed my fist against my mouth for a second, then dropped it. How long have you known? 4 weeks, he said. I heard them arguing through my kitchen window. I was replacing the exterior camera on the side of the house. It was late, maybe 10:30. Their voices carried. He exhaled slowly. I almost knocked on your door that same night. But I stopped myself because I knew you wouldn't believe me. Not just from a conversation I overheard. I needed more. So you hacked my car. He didn't look away. I installed a small device on your OBD2 port. That's a diagnostic interface built into every modern vehicle. It's what mechanics plug into when they run a systems check. From there, I was able to access your car's audio system remotely using a custom script I wrote. You leave your garage door open on Thursday mornings when you do yard work out front. I've seen it every week for 2 years. It took me less than 90 seconds. The device is smaller than a thumb drive. I programmed the voice prompts in advance and triggered them manually tonight when I was tracking your GPS position in real time. He paused. I know that wasn't my right. I know it was a violation of your privacy, and I will answer for that however you need me to. But I needed you to change your route without knowing why, because if you'd known, you would have confronted Nadine, and they would have disappeared every shred of evidence before we could use it. My throat felt like sandpaper. You said you talked to the police 3 days ago, when I confirmed the men they hired had been scouting the road. He nodded toward the patrol car. Gerald, I'd like to introduce you to someone. The officer who'd been standing at the barrier walked over. He was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered with a weathered face, and the kind of unhurried movement that comes from years of doing a difficult job without flinching. He extended his hand. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Detective Ray Rourke, Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. I've been working with Mr. Marsh for the past 72 hours. His handshake was firm and brief. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. What circumstances exactly? My voice came out rougher than I meant. Tell me what's actually happening out there on that road right now. Rourke's expression didn't change, but his eyes went serious in a way that confirmed what part of me already knew. We have reason to believe 3 individuals were positioned on Blue Ridge Parkway tonight with the intention of staging a traffic incident involving your vehicle. We have them under surveillance as of 40 minutes ago. He glanced at Declan, then back at me. You not being on that road is why they're still sitting there waiting instead of... He stopped. Let the rest of the sentence stay unfinished. The pressure behind my eyes got worse. I turned away for a second, looked out at the dark tree line, and breathed through my nose until the burning eased off. 68 years old. 39 years of marriage. 1 daughter, 1 person left who shared my blood and my history, and the memory of Margaret's laugh at the kitchen table on Sunday mornings. I turned back around. What do you need from me? I asked. Rourke studied my face for a moment before he answered. Honestly, Right now, tonight, I need you to go home. Act like nothing happened. Don't call Nadine, don't change your routine, don't give either of them any reason to think the plan went wrong. He folded his arms. Can you do that? I almost said I didn't know. Instead, I said, what's the alternative? We spook them tonight, they lawyer up tomorrow, and we've got a grainy audio recording and a neighbor's testimony. Rourke's voice was flat and honest. That's not enough to hold them. Not even close. My jaw tightened. Then tell me what is enough. Rourke looked at me steadily. Time. And your cooperation. Time. I repeated. The word tasted bitter. And my cooperation. I know that's not what you want to hear, Rourke said. He glanced briefly at Declan. I also want to be transparent with you about Mr. Marsh's situation. He came to us voluntarily before taking any action. Everything he did, the device, the audio intercept, the spoofed signal, was done with our knowledge and under a cooperation agreement. We're not pursuing charges against him. That was decided the moment he walked through our door. Declan looked at the table. He hadn't mentioned that part to me. He wasn't apologetic about it. I appreciated that. A man who tells you hard things without softening them is a man you can trust with hard things. But here's the reality, Mr. Whitmore. Right now, we have an audio recording obtained under circumstances that a defense attorney will tear apart in 20 minutes. We have 3 men sitting on a parkway who haven't done anything yet except park a truck. And we have Mr. Marsh's testimony about a conversation he overheard through a window. He let that sit. You want to see your daughter and son-in-law in a federal courtroom with no way out. Then we do this right. I looked at Declan. He was watching me with that careful, steady expression, the look of a man who has already thought through every version of this conversation and knows there's only one direction it can go. Tell me about the will, I said. Rourke's eyebrow went up slightly. What about it? Nadine mentioned the lawyers asking questions about the trust structure. My voice was tight controlled. She sounded panicked. I want to know if you know something about that. Rourke exchanged a glance with Declan, then reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He didn't hand it to me right away. 3 months ago, you filed a trust amendment with your attorney, Franklin Okafor, transferred the bulk of your estate into a charitable trust structure with a residual beneficiary clause. He held out the paper. Under the terms of that amendment, if you were to pass away today, Nadine receives a fixed annual disbursement, roughly $40,000 a year, and the rest of the estate goes to the trust. I stared at him. She knows about that. She's known since August, Rourke said. Her attorney flagged the amendment when your estate paperwork was updated in the county records. He paused. Which means she's known for 2 months that the inheritance she was counting on no longer exists in the form she expected. The cold air felt colder. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. Then why? My voice cracked on the second word, just barely, just enough for me to hear it. If I die and she gets almost nothing, then what is the point of any of this? Rourke looked at me steadily. That's exactly what we're trying to find out. There are pieces we don't have yet. And some of those pieces, Gerald, you might be the only one who can help us find. Declan stepped in, his voice quieter now. Mr. Whitmore, I know you've had about 40 seconds to process the worst thing a father can hear. And I know this isn't fair. But I need to ask you something. He waited until I looked at him directly. Can you go home tonight, walk into that house, and act like this conversation never happened? My jaw tightened until I felt it in my temples. I've been acting like things were fine for 68 years, I said. I think I can manage one more night. Something moved across Declan's face, not quite relief, not quite sorrow, something in between. Then here's what we need from you. Go home. Sleep if you can. Don't call Nadine. Don't change anything about your schedule or your routine. We'll be in contact tomorrow morning. He glanced at Rourke. and we're going to need access to your home security system, specifically your interior cameras. What are you looking for? I'll explain tomorrow, Declan said. I promise. I drove home alone. That 40-minute drive back through Asheville at 2 in the morning is something I will never fully describe to another person. The city was dark and quiet, the streets empty orange streetlights blurring past my windows. I had the radio off. I drove the speed limit exactly, used my turn signals at every corner, kept both hands on the wheel, all the mechanical habits of a careful man trying to hold himself together through pure routine. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the recording. Nadine's voice. Not frightened, not coerced, clipped, urgent, focused. The voice of a woman managing a problem. That was what turned my stomach more than anything, not the words, but the tone. The way she had sounded so much like herself. Like the same woman who called me every Sunday morning and brought pastries from the bakery on Merriman Avenue. I pulled into my driveway at 2:12 in the morning and sat in the dark for a long time before I went inside. The house felt different. I'd lived in it for 39 years, raised Nadine in it, buried Margaret from it, and tonight it felt like a place I didn't quite recognize. I went to the kitchen out of habit, filled a glass of water, stood at the counter, and drank it slowly. My reflection in the window over the sink looked old in a way I wasn't used to seeing. Tired and old and very, very alone. Then something floated up through the fog in my mind. Small. Almost nothing. 2 months ago, right around the time Nadine would have found out about the trust amendment, she had stopped by on a Tuesday afternoon. Not a Sunday, not a planned visit. She'd said she was in the neighborhood and wanted to check in. We had coffee. She asked if she could use my printer because hers was broken. I'd said of course and waved her toward the office. She'd been in there for maybe 20 minutes. At the time, I thought nothing of it. She was my daughter. She had grown up in that house. The idea of questioning why she spent 20 minutes in my office would never have entered my mind. But standing in my kitchen at 2 in the morning with the memory of her voice on that recording still fresh in my ears, I found myself staring at the hallway that led to the office door and thinking about what exactly she might have been doing in there for 20 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon in August. And for the first time that night, the ache in my chest shifted into something harder, something colder. I set my water glass down on the counter, straightened up, and walked down the hallway toward my office. Not to look through anything. Not yet. Just to stand at the door and feel out whether my gut was telling me something my brain hadn't caught up to. It was. I went to bed. I didn't sleep much. But by the time the sky started going gray over the mountains, I already knew what I was going to do first thing in the morning. I didn't bother making coffee first. By the time the sky outside had shifted from black to that pale, washed-out gray that passes for dawn in October, I was already sitting at my desk in the home office with the security system pulled up on the monitor. My eyes felt like sandpaper. My back ached from a night of lying in bed staring at the ceiling. But my hands were steady, and my mind was clearer than it had any right to be, the kind of sharp, cold clarity that comes when grief and anger burn off everything soft and leave only the part of you that needs to know. The camera system covered 4 zones inside the house. I went straight to the office feed and set the filter to motion-detected events, date range the past 90 days. There were 3 hits. The first one loaded, and I leaned forward in my chair. August 15th, 1:23 in the morning. The footage was crisp. I'd upgraded the system 2 years back, high-definition night vision enabled. The timestamp in the corner burned white against the dark hallway. I watched the front door open slowly, the way someone opens a door when they don't want it to creak. A figure stepped inside. Dark jacket hair pulled back. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Nadine. She moved through the house with a quiet, practiced efficiency that turned my blood cold, not hesitant, not nervous, not the way a person moves when they're doing something for the first time. She went straight down the hallway, straight to the office door, and straight to the filing cabinet in the corner. Like she had memorized the layout. like she had thought about this. I sat there watching my daughter pull open drawers in my filing cabinet at 1:20 in the morning and felt something tear loose in the center of my chest that I don't have a better word for than grief. She searched for 14 minutes that first night, left empty-handed. I pulled up the second event, September 2nd, 2:07 in the morning. She was back. Same jacket, same careful movements. But this time she spent longer 38 minutes, and she was more systematic about it. I watched her go through every drawer of the filing cabinet, then move to the built-in bookshelf, pulling volumes partway out and tilting them to check behind them. She found nothing. By the time she left, there was a tension in her shoulders that even the camera could capture. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. The third event, September 19th, 12:51 in the morning. This time she brought a small flashlight. Pen-sized, tactical, the kind you clip to a keychain. She swept it slowly across the desk's surface, the windowsill, the bottom of the bookshelf. Then she crouched down and checked under the desk itself, running her hand along the underside of the drawers. She was looking for something hidden, something taped or tucked away where casual searching wouldn't find it. She never found it, because what she was looking for was the original signed copy of my 2019 will, and that document was locked inside the small fireproof safe bolted to the floor of the closet behind the filing cabinet. The safe that Margaret and I had installed in 2017, that only I had the combination to, that Nadine had never been told existed. I sat back in my chair and pressed both palms flat against my thighs to stop them from shaking. I understood now. The full picture clicked into place with the merciless precision of tumblers in a lock. The 2019 will left everything directly to Nadine. No trust, no charitable disbursements, no complicated structure, just a straightforward inheritance of everything I owned. When I had updated the will 3 months ago, routing the bulk of the estate into the trust, that document became the obstacle standing between Nadine and everything she believed she was owed. If she could get her hands on the original 2019 will and replace the current version, and if I were no longer alive to contradict it, there would be a legal battle, messy, expensive, uncertain. But it would be a battle she had a fighting chance of winning. She wasn't just counting on me dying. She was planning to rewrite what happened afterward. I picked up my phone and called Declan. He answered on the second ring. "You're up early." "I pulled the camera footage," I said. My voice was steady. I was almost proud of it. "She's been in this house 3 times in the last 2 months. Middle of the night every time. She's been going through my filing cabinet." A beat of quiet on his end. "What was she looking for?" "The original copy of my 2019 will." I exhaled slowly. "She didn't find it, but she's been looking." "Declan, this didn't start 2 months ago when she found out about the trust amendment. She's been thinking about this for a long time." "I know," Declan said, and the weight in his voice told me he wasn't surprised. "Gerald, I need you to listen to me. Don't move anything. Don't change anything in that office. If she comes back, and she might, we want her looking and not finding. Every time she enters that house on that footage is another piece we can use." My jaw clenched. "She has a spare key." "I know. Leave it that way for now." A pause. "How are you holding up?" The question caught me off guard. I looked around the office at the desk Margaret had picked out at an estate sale in 1991, at the framed photo of the 2 of us on the lake house dock, the summer before she got sick, at the filing cabinet my daughter had been searching through in the dark for 2 months. "I've been better," I said quietly. "I've been a whole lot better." "I know," Declan said. "I'm sorry, truly." I set the phone down after we hung up and sat in the silence of that office for a long time. 68 years old. And somehow the hardest thing I'd ever had to understand was that the person who knew this house best, every drawer, every shelf, every creaking floorboard, had been using that knowledge against me. Outside, a car turned onto my street. I recognized the sound of the engine before I saw the headlights sweep across the front window. Preston's car, pulling into my driveway. My chest tightened like a fist had closed around it. I looked at the clock on the computer screen. 8:52 in the morning. I closed the security footage, straightened up in my chair, and by the time I heard the knock at the front door, my face was composed, my breathing was even, and Gerald Whitmore, the man who didn't know a single thing that had happened last night, was ready to open the door. They brought pastries from Geraldine's bakery on Merriman Avenue. That was the first thing I noticed when I opened the door. The white paper bag with the blue logo tied with a piece of twine the way the bakery always did it. Margaret had loved that place. Almond croissants on Saturday mornings, coffee in the good mugs the newspaper spread across the kitchen table. It had been one of our rituals for 20 years. I don't know if Nadine remembered that. I don't know if she chose that bakery on purpose or if it was just the closest one to her house. But standing there in my doorway, with that bag held out toward me like an offering, she looked so much like my daughter, the one I'd raised, the one I thought I knew, that my chest ached with something I couldn't name. "Morning, Dad." She smiled, warm, easy. "We were in the neighborhood. Hope it's not too early." "Never too early," I said, and I stepped back to let them in. Preston followed her through the door with his hands in his jacket pockets and a moderate smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was a good-looking man, Preston tall, well-dressed, the kind of composed that reads as confidence until you look closely enough to see the calculation underneath it. "Gerald," he said, clapping me once on the shoulder, "you look tired. Long drive last night. Same drive it always is." I told him. I went to the kitchen and started the coffee without being asked, because that was what I always did when they came over, and I was not going to give either of them a single deviation from normal to notice. Fog was thick. Took it slow. "Smart," Preston said, settling into the chair at the far end of the kitchen table, the same chair he always took, the one that faced the back window. "Those mountain roads get slick this time of year." "They do," I agreed pleasantly. Nadine was already unpacking the pastries onto the ceramic plate I kept on the counter, moving through my kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who had grown up in it. She knew where everything was. The plates, the napkins, the butter dish. She set 3 places at the table with a practiced efficiency that made my stomach clench. "How's the lake house?" she asked, bringing the plate to the table and sitting down across from Preston. "I always worry about the heat out there when the temperatures drop." "Heat's fine," I said. "I checked the thermostat before I left." "Did you make it all the way out? The fog report for that area was pretty bad last night." I looked at her as I poured the coffee. Her expression was open, concerned, utterly natural. The eyes of a woman asking about her father's weekend trip. I held her gaze for 1 second longer than necessary, and she didn't flinch at all. "Made it fine," I said, and set the coffee pot back on the warmer. We sat down together. I ate an almond croissant because Margaret would have wanted me to, and because refusing it would have been a tell, and because even in the middle of the worst thing I had ever lived through, it still tasted good. Preston talked about a property development project he was following in Charlotte. Nadine asked about my furnace again, and whether the repair company had called back. I answered everything with the calm, slightly distracted manner of a man whose biggest concern is a noisy furnace. Then Nadine reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her fingers were warm. They always were. Even when she was small, her hands had been warm. I used to tease her about it, said she had a furnace inside. "Dad," she said softly, "I wanted to talk to you about Emma." Emma was her daughter, my granddaughter. 7 years old, bright as a penny, the spitting image of Margaret at that age. I made myself look gentle, attentive. "What about her?" Nadine's brow creased in that particular way it did when she was worried, a small V between her eyebrows that she'd had since she was a teenager. "The specialist in Charlotte wants to move forward with the next round of treatment. She's been doing better, but they want to stay ahead of it." She squeezed my hand. The estimate came in at around 30,000. I know it's a lot to ask, Dad. I wouldn't if I had any other option. $30,000. I thought about the file Declan had mentioned, the one showing no corresponding hospital records for any of the previous payments. $247,000 over 3 years, and not a single matching medical invoice. I thought about Emma's last birthday 3 weeks ago, when she had run circles around my backyard shrieking with laughter while I pushed her on the tire swing, and how she had looked about as sick as any perfectly healthy 7-year-old. I patted Nadine's hand. "I'll have Franklin send the transfer by Monday," I said. Her whole face softened with relief. "Thank you, Dad. Really, you have no idea what this means." Preston looked up from his coffee with a smile that was almost convincing. "You're a good man, Gerald," he said. I picked up my croissant and took another bite, and did not trust myself to respond to that. Later, after everything had come apart, Rourke's team would confirm what I had already suspected: Emma was perfectly healthy. The medical claims had never been real. My granddaughter had been used as a prop in her parents' scheme, as innocent of it as I had been. We talked for another 30 minutes. Normal conversation: the weather, a neighbor's renovation, whether I'd watched the game last weekend. Preston was quieter than usual, which I noticed, though I gave no sign of it. He was watching me. Not in a dramatic, obvious way, just small glances, the kind you give someone when you're trying to read them without being caught reading them. I'd done enough business negotiations in my life to recognize the behavior. He was assessing me, checking for cracks. I gave him none. When they stood to leave, I walked them to the door, the way I always did. Nadine hugged me in the doorway properly, both arms, her head against my shoulder for a moment. I held her back the same way I always did, because my arms remembered how to do that, even when the rest of me was somewhere else entirely. "Call me tonight," she said as she pulled away. "I always do," I told her. I stood at the open door and watched them walk down the front path to Preston's car. Watched Nadine get into the passenger seat. Watched Preston open the driver's door and pause just for a half second and glance back toward my driveway. Not at me, not at the house. At the rear of my SUV, his eyes dropped to the back of the vehicle and then came back up, and then he got in the car and pulled the door shut. A quick look. Practiced. Like he was checking something he expected to find in a specific place. I kept my expression exactly the same as I watched them drive away. But when the car turned out of the street and disappeared, I let out a breath that felt like it came from somewhere deep down in my bones. He was checking the GPS tracker, making sure it was still there, making sure everything was still in place, which meant the plan was still in motion, which meant I had exactly 1 day to make sure they walked straight into the end of it. I went back inside, closed the door, and picked up my phone. I had a call to make to Franklin Okafor, because there was a question burning in my gut that I needed a 19-year attorney relationship and about $400 an hour to answer properly. Franklin Okafor had been my attorney for 19 years. He'd helped me close my first commercial property deal back in 2006, sat across the table from me at Margaret's estate planning sessions, and held my hand, figuratively speaking, because Franklin was not a hand-holding man through every major financial decision of my adult life. He was 61 years old, meticulous to the point of being almost painful about it, and he had an office on the 4th floor of a building on Lexington Avenue that smelled like old books and printer toner and the kind of quiet competence that money buys. When I walked in that Saturday afternoon, he was already at his desk. I had called ahead. He had cleared his calendar. He looked up when I came through the door, and the expression on his face told me Rourke had already briefed him. "Sit down, Gerald," he said. "Not hello. Not how are you. Just sit down the way you talk to someone when pleasantries would be an insult to the situation." I sat. "I need to know everything," I said. "Not the version where you soften the edges. All of it." Franklin folded his hands on the desk and looked at me steadily. "Then I'll start with the debt." He turned his monitor toward me. On the screen was a credit and financial liability report, the kind that gets pulled during litigation, discovery comprehensive and precise. At the top of the page, two names, Preston Elliott Crowe and Nadine Marie Whitmore Crowe. Preston made a series of leveraged investments in commercial real estate in the Charlotte market between 2022 and 2024. Franklin said, his voice even and measured. Mixed-use developments mostly. 2 of the 3 projects defaulted. The third is significantly underwater. He tapped the screen. Total outstanding debt as of this month, $5.3 million. My stomach turned over. 5 million, 5.3, Franklin said, precisely because he was that kind of man. The primary lender, a regional bank out of Charlotte, has already issued a formal notice of acceleration. That means they've called the entire loan due, not just the missed payments. Preston has until the 30th of November to either repay or negotiate a restructuring. He paused. Given the state of his assets, restructuring is not a realistic option. I leaned back in my chair. My chest felt like something heavy was sitting on it. And Nadine has a separate liability. Franklin opened a second document. 18 months ago, she took out a home equity line of credit against the property she and Preston own jointly. $340,000. The draw has been almost fully exhausted. He looked up. The funds were transferred to a personal account held solely in her name. She was moving money away from Preston, I said slowly. It appears so. Franklin's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Gerald, I want you to understand what I'm telling you. These are not 2 people who made some bad investments and panicked. These are 2 people who have been in serious financial trouble for at least 2 years, who have been managing that trouble in separate directions, and who, when faced with losing everything, decided that the most viable solution was your estate. My throat tightened so hard the words came out rough. Because they thought they'd inherit it. Because they planned to, Franklin said quietly. Past tense, present tense, both. I looked at the window for a long moment, at the afternoon light coming through the glass. Ordinary and indifferent, and I breathed through it until the worst of it passed. Falling apart in Franklin's office was not something I was going to do. There's something else, Franklin said. His voice shifted, careful now, the way it got when he was about to deliver something that required handling. He opened a third document and turned it toward me. A scanned form, official-looking, with a county seal in the upper left corner. 3 weeks ago, Detective Rourke requested access to the Buncombe County Register of Deeds and the local notary public filing records as part of his investigation. This came up. Franklin pointed to the document header. This is a power of attorney application, filed in October of last year, October 21st, 2024 to be specific. The applicant was requesting durable financial power of attorney over your assets. Your name appears as the principal. I leaned forward and looked at the signature line at the bottom of the page. The signature looked like mine. The slope of the letters, the particular way the G in Gerald looped it, was close, genuinely close. My mouth went dry. The notary public flagged it during the signature verification process, Franklin continued. They use a comparison protocol. They keep a reference signature on file from when the document is first established. When the signatures don't match within tolerance, the application gets flagged and denied. He tapped the rejection stamp in red at the bottom of the page. This was denied on October 28th, 7 days after it was filed. My eyes moved to the applicant line at the top of the form, the name of the person who would receive the power of attorney if it had been approved. Nadine Marie Whitmore Crowe. She filed this herself, I said. My voice sounded strange to me, flat and tight at the same time. Under her own name, yes. Franklin looked at me with the steady, unsparing attention of a man who understood exactly how much what he was saying cost. If this had gone through Gerald, if the signature had passed verification, She would have had the legal authority to manage, transfer, and liquidate your assets while you were still alive. Bank accounts, property holdings, investment portfolios, all of it. The room felt smaller than it had when I walked in. The books on the walls, the afternoon light through the window, the hum of the building's heating system. All of it narrowed down to that red rejection stamp on the page and the name above the signature line. My daughter, not Preston. Not some third party, not a scheme hatched in desperation last month. Nadine, 1 year ago. Planning this with enough forethought to attempt a legal maneuver before she attempted anything else. She practiced my signature, I said. It came out almost like a question, though I already knew it was true. That's what she was doing when she came over last September with all those papers for me to sign. Insurance forms, she said. Bank updates. My voice cracked on the last word, just the edge of it, just enough to hear. She was practicing my handwriting, right in front of me. Franklin reached across the desk and set his hand briefly on mine, a gesture so uncharacteristic of him that it hit me harder than anything he'd said. I'm sorry, Gerald, he said. I truly am. I stared at that rejection stamp for a long time. Then I looked up at Franklin and said, What do I do with this? We use it, he said. Every piece of this we use. I drove home from Franklin's office in a kind of silence that had weight to it. Not the comfortable silence of a familiar drive. This was the kind of silence that presses against the inside of your skull and makes every stoplight feel like an interrogation. I took Merriman Avenue North instead of the highway, the slower way, because I wasn't ready to be home yet, and I needed the extra 15 minutes to put myself back together before I walked through my own front door. The October sun was dropping behind the western ridge, painting the sky in colors Margaret would have called outrageous, her word for anything beautiful that seemed to be showing off. Burnt orange and deep rose above the tree line. I drove through it without really seeing it. I kept coming back to September of last year. The 15th, I was fairly certain. A Thursday. Nadine had called that morning and asked if she could stop by in the afternoon. She was on her way back from a meeting in Weaverville, she said, and wanted to bring me some soup from that deli on Riverside I liked. She had arrived at 3:30 with a quart of chicken and wild rice and a manila folder tucked under her arm. Just some paperwork I need your help with, Dad, she'd said, setting the folder on the kitchen table. Nothing complicated, mostly insurance updates and the bank account cosigner form we talked about. She had laid out 7 or 8 sheets across the table and walked me through each one with a pen already uncapped. She'd been relaxed, almost breezy, explaining each form in the cheerful, slightly simplified way she used with me. Sometimes the way adult children talk to aging parents when they've decided somewhere along the way that the parent no longer needs to read the fine print himself. I had signed each one without looking closely because she was my daughter, and she had told me what they were, and I trusted her. Sitting in my car at the red light on Merrimon, I pressed my palm flat against the steering wheel and held it there. She hadn't just used those forms for the insurance updates. She had used them to study my signature. Up close in real time under the guise of helping her father with routine paperwork. She'd watched my hand move across each line, watched the angle of my wrist, the pressure of the pen, the particular way I formed the W in Whitmore. And then she had gone home and practiced until she could replicate it well enough to attempt a legal filing. A car behind me honked. The light had gone green. I lifted my foot off the brake and drove. When I got home, the house was quiet, in the way it always was on Saturday afternoons. No sounds except the creak of the porch step and the distant sound of a leaf blower 2 streets over. I went straight to the kitchen, poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a glass, and drank half of it standing at the counter. Then I picked up my phone and called Declan. He answered before the second ring. How'd it go with Franklin? She tried to file a power of attorney over my assets a year ago, I said. My voice came out harder than I intended. October 24th last year. Forged my signature and filed it with the county. It got rejected, the notary caught it. A sharp exhale on Declan's end. She did it under her own name. Her own name, I confirmed. Which means she's been working on this since before anyone found out about the trust amendment. This wasn't panic, Declan. This was a long-term project. Gerald. His voice dropped to something quieter, more careful. I need to tell you something I should have told you this morning. I was waiting until I had it fully confirmed, but given what Franklin just found... A pause. I think you need to hear it now. I set the bourbon glass down on the counter. Tell me, 3 months ago when I was doing routine network monitoring around the neighborhood, I run passive scans from my home system. It's part of what I do professionally. I picked up an anomalous signal from your driveway. A low-frequency GPS transmission. Consistent, regular, originating from a point very close to your vehicle. My grip tightened on the phone. A GPS signal. A tracker, Declan said. Commercial-grade magnetic mount. The kind you can order online for about $60. It transmits a location ping every 30 seconds to a registered account. His voice was measured, but I could hear the tension underneath it. I traced the device registration through the manufacturer's database. It took me about a week to work through the back channels, but I got it. The tracker is registered to a shell company called Meridian Property Analytics, LLC. I've never heard of that company. It doesn't really exist, Declan said. It's a paper entity. But the registration email used to create the shell company traces back to a personal account linked to Preston Crow. The bourbon sat untouched on the counter. My jaw was so tight it ached. He's been tracking my car, I said. Every trip, every stop. For at least 3 months, possibly longer. That's just how far back I can verify. Declan's voice was firm now, delivering this the way a surgeon delivers a diagnosis, clean, clear, no unnecessary softening. He knows your schedule, Gerald. He knows you stop for gas at the Shell station on Hendersonville Road. He knows you sometimes pull over at the overlook on the parkway when the weather's clear. He knows what time you leave for the lake house and what time you usually arrive. The room felt like it was tilting slightly. I put one hand on the counter to steady myself, not because I was physically unsteady, but because something in my body needed to feel something solid. He's been watching me for months, I said. Yes, and Nadine knew. Declan hesitated for just a fraction of a second, not long, but I heard it. That we're still establishing, he said carefully. But Gerald the tracker was installed on a Tuesday, 3 months ago. Cross-referencing the date with your security footage, my stomach dropped before he finished the sentence. That's the Tuesday Nadine came over with soup, I said. Yes, Declan said. It is. I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed against my ear, and the autumn light going gold through the window over the sink. And I thought about my daughter standing at my kitchen table with a quart of chicken and wild rice and a manila folder full of forms for me to sign. Her warm hands, her easy smile. The soup she'd said she brought because she was thinking of me. And Preston, somewhere in the driveway, crouched down next to my SUV for 30 seconds. While I was inside signing papers my daughter had laid out specifically to keep me occupied. Declan, I said. My voice was very quiet. Don't touch that tracker. Don't remove it. Don't do anything to it. I wasn't planning to. He understood immediately. You want to use it? I want to use it, I confirmed. There was something almost like grim satisfaction in saying it out loud. Because suddenly, the instrument Preston had put on my car to hunt me with had become the exact tool I needed to lead him somewhere he didn't want to go. Something was hidden under my car. Had been there for months. I drove to Franklin's office with it. I drove to the cardiac clinic with it. I drove home every single night with it and never once knew. Before I show you what it was, type "found it" in the comments, so I know you're still riding this with me. A small note. Some elements of this story are fictional, shaped to carry something worth hearing. If you'd rather not continue, you're free to step away right here. The door's always open. I finished the bourbon, rinsed the glass, and went to the garage. I didn't tell Declan I was going. I just hung up the phone, walked down the hallway, pushed open the door to the garage, and stood there for a moment in the half-dark, with my hand still on the doorframe. The overhead fluorescent light buzzed on automatically. The SUV sat there the way it always did, solid familiar, a vehicle I'd owned for 6 years and driven across 4 states and trusted completely. I walked to the rear of the car, crouched down, and got on my hands and knees on the concrete floor. 68 years old, on the floor of my own garage, using my phone as a flashlight to look under the back end of my car because my son-in-law had turned it into a tracking device. The indignity of it burned. Not as much as everything else, but it burned. Declan had said rear left wheel well, so I started there. I swept the light slowly along the inner lip of the wheel arch, across the frame rail, into the recessed sections where the undercarriage curved up toward the chassis. I was maybe 40 seconds in when the beam caught something that didn't belong. Small, about the size of a matchbox. Matte black, almost invisible against the dark metal of the frame. Held in place by a pair of strong magnets, the kind that snap to steel with a grip that feels permanent until you know to pull straight out. I reached in and took it off with 2 fingers. It came away with a soft click that was in the silence of my garage, the loudest sound I had ever heard. I sat back on my heels and held it under the light. A GPS tracker exactly like Declan had described. A small LED on the side blinked once every 30 seconds in a slow, patient rhythm. Still transmitting. Still watching. The thing weighed almost nothing. Less than 2 ounces, maybe. 2 ounces that had cataloged 11 weeks of my life without my knowledge or consent. Every errand, every stop, every Friday night drive to the lake house. My hand started shaking then. Not from age, not from cold. From something that sat right at the boundary between grief and fury and didn't have a clean name. I pulled up Declan's number and called him back. "I've got it," I said when he answered. "It's in my hand." A beat. "How are you doing?" "I'm on the floor of my garage," I said. "That about covers it." I turned the tracker over in my fingers. The LED blinked again. Patient. Relentless. "Tell me exactly how you found this." "Start from the beginning." "About 3 months ago, I was running a passive RF scan of the neighborhood. I do it every few weeks as part of my security routine. I'm looking for rogue devices, unauthorized access points, anything anomalous on the spectrum." Declan's voice was careful, precise. "I picked up a low-frequency GPS ping that didn't match any of the registered devices in my own system. I triangulated the source to your driveway, specifically to the rear section of your vehicle. And you just happened to be scanning that day." "I scan every couple of weeks," he said. "It's habit, part of the job." A pause. "Gerald, I want to be honest with you. When I first found it, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. Trackers like that get used by parents monitoring teenage drivers, by fleet companies, by people going through divorces who want to know where a spouse is. I didn't assume the worst immediately." "What changed your mind?" "The shell company registration," he said. "It took me a few days to trace it. Meridian Property Analytics. It was set up 6 months ago using a prepaid email account. But the payment method used to register the device with the manufacturer was a business credit card. And that credit card was issued to a company Preston controls through his Charlotte real estate portfolio." His voice tightened slightly. That was when I started listening more carefully to what was happening next door. I got up off the floor. My knees protested, they always did these days, but I barely noticed. I carried the tracker to the workbench along the garage wall and set it down under the light. "He's been watching me since July," I said. "At minimum," Declan confirmed. "That's when the device activation record starts. But Gerald, the coverage is remarkable. 3 trips to Franklin's office. Your visit to the cardiac clinic in August for your annual checkup. The Tuesday Nadine came over." He stopped. "He knew your rhythms better than you probably knew them yourself." My throat tightened. I thought about Preston sitting at my kitchen table that morning asking if I'd had a long drive, asking if I was tired, with a GPS ping from every stop I'd made in the last 11 weeks sitting on a screen somewhere in his house. "There's something I want to say to you," I told Declan, "about why you did all of this. The scanning, the tracking, the hack. You put yourself at serious legal risk for an old man you've known for 4 years. You're not just an old man to me," Declan said, and his voice went rough on the edges in a way that told me he hadn't planned to say it quite like that. "You knocked on my door on Thanksgiving 3 years ago because you could see through my kitchen window that I was eating cereal alone. That's not nothing. That matters. People who do things like that don't happen very often." My eyes went hot, and I pressed my fist against my mouth for a moment hard. I was not going to cry in my garage over a GPS tracker. I absolutely refused. "All right," I said when I trusted my voice again. "Here's what we're going to do with this." I picked the tracker back up and turned it over once more. That little LED blinked, steady, confident, still reporting to Preston that the car was exactly where it should be, that everything was normal, that his father-in-law had no idea what was attached to the underside of his vehicle. "I'm putting it back," I said. Declan went quiet for a moment. "Then, because if it goes dark, he'll know something changed," I finished. "And right now the most valuable thing I have is the fact that he thinks he knows exactly where I am and what I'm doing." I set the tracker back in my palm, feeling the weight of it, or rather the absence of weight, the way something so small could carry so much damage. "I'm going to put this back on the frame, and then I'm going to come over to your house and we're going to figure out how to use it." There was a pause on the line, and then Declan said something I didn't expect. "Margaret would have been proud of you," he said quietly. I put the tracker back under the car, pressed it firm against the frame until the magnets caught and held. Stood up, brushed off my knees. "I know," I said. "Let's get to work." For the first time in 30 years, I walked across my front lawn to my neighbor's house, not to return a borrowed tool or drop off a plate of something Margaret had made too much of, but to plan something I never thought I would have to plan in my life. Declan's porch light was already on. He opened the door before I knocked. "Come in," he said. He was in a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his expression had the focused quality of someone who had been preparing for this conversation while I was still putting my shoes on. His house was the kind of organized that said a precise mind lived in it. Clean lines, minimal clutter. 3 monitors on the desk in the back room, visible through the open door. On the kitchen table, he had already spread out a printed map of the Blue Ridge Parkway corridor and a legal pad covered in handwritten notes. I sat down across from the map and looked at it. The route I had driven every Friday for 11 years, reduced to colored lines and contour marks on a sheet of paper. "Tell me the whole plan," I said. "What you can do, what Rourke can do, and what you need from me." Declan pulled his chair around to my side of the table and pointed to a section of the map about 3 miles past the main parkway entrance. "This is the fork. Route 14 turn-off on the right service road straight ahead. That's where they've positioned the ambush. We confirmed through surveillance that the hired group has scouted this exact spot 4 times in the last 3 weeks." He tapped the paper. "The plan, as Preston and Nadine understand it, is that you turn right at this fork on Friday night. That puts you on an isolated stretch with no lighting, no cameras, no witnesses. The truck blocks the road and—" He stopped. "You know the rest." "I do," I said flatly. "So how do we change it?" "2 parts." Declan stood and walked to the back room, returning with a small device similar in size to the tracker under my car, but with a different port configuration. "This is a GPS signal emitter. I can sync it to the tracker on your vehicle and broadcast a spoofed signal, a false location feed, that shows your car traveling the parkway route, turning right at the fork, proceeding exactly as expected." He set it on the table. "Preston will be watching the tracker on his phone. He'll see what he wants to see." "While I'm actually somewhere else," I said. While you're actually somewhere else, Declan confirmed. You'll leave the house at the normal time, same as always, but you'll take Elk Mountain Road west instead of toward the parkway. By the time the spoofed signal shows your car turning right at the fork, you'll be parked in a shopping center on the other south side of Asheville. I looked at the map. It was elegant in its simplicity. The kind of plan that worked not because it was complicated, but because it gave the other side exactly what they were already looking for. The laptop on Declan's desk chimed. He walked over and accepted the incoming video call. A window opened, Detective Rourke sitting in what looked like a departmental office jacket, still on coffee cup at his elbow. "Gerald," Rourke nodded at the screen. "Glad you're in the room. Let me tell you where we are." "Go ahead," I said. "As of this evening, we have 3 individuals under active surveillance on the Parkway corridor. 2 males and 1 female driving a commercial box truck registered to a freight company in Gastonia. The truck has made 4 reconnaissance passes on the route. Tonight, it's parked at a trailhead lot, about a mile from the fork." Rourke's voice was the same measured cadence I'd heard at the checkpoint, calm, thorough, no unnecessary embellishment. "We have 2 cameras in position along the route approved under an emergency judicial authorization. The moment that truck moves into blocking position, we have sufficient grounds for an arrest on conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, potentially escalating to attempted murder, depending on what we recover from their communications." "What about Preston and Nadine?" I asked. "That's where we need you." Rourke leaned forward slightly. "Right now, the 3 individuals in that truck are the only ones with direct physical exposure. Preston and Nadine gave instructions through intermediaries. We have digital traces pointing back to Preston's shell company, but a good defense attorney will argue he had no knowledge of what the contractors actually did." He held my gaze through the screen. "We need a direct link. The cleanest way to get that is to let the operation proceed, arrest the team in the act, and use the physical evidence recovered from them, communications, payment records, written instructions, to build the chain back to Preston and Nadine." "And if the chain is clean enough?" I asked. "Then we go after both of them simultaneously," Rourke said. "Preston at the airport because we believe he's planning to leave the country after this, and Nadine at her residence. Same morning, coordinated." The word airport landed in my chest like a stone dropping into still water. I hadn't known about that part yet. "He's planning to run," I said. "We believe so," Rourke said. "That's why the timing matters. This happens tomorrow night or we risk losing him." I looked at the map on Declan's table. I looked at the device Declan had set on the table next to it. I looked at the framed photograph on the kitchen wall behind Declan's shoulder, a picture I recognized because I was in it. Thanksgiving, 3 years ago. Declan and me at my kitchen table, paper plates, the good candles Margaret had bought and never gotten around to using. He was 27 in that picture, thin-faced, a little lost around the eyes. I'd knocked on his door because I could see through his kitchen window that he was eating cereal alone, and no one should eat cereal alone on Thanksgiving. "You didn't have to do any of this," I said to him. Not for the first time, but meaning it differently now. Declan looked at me with an expression that was equal parts gratitude and stubbornness. "You fed me turkey and called me son for 3 years, he said. "You don't get to tell me what I don't have to do." Something cracked open in my chest, warm and painful, at the same time, the way old injuries feel in cold weather. I pressed my hand flat on the table and nodded once because words weren't going to come out cleanly just then. Rourke cleared his throat on the screen. "So, are we doing this?" I straightened up, squared my shoulders the way Margaret always said I did when I'd made a decision and wasn't going back on it. "We're doing this," I said. Rourke nodded. "Then, Gerald, I need you to call Nadine tonight. Casual conversation. Mention your plans for tomorrow evening, but give her the wrong time and the wrong road. Can you do that?" "I already know what I'm going to say," I told him. Declan was watching me with something that looked a lot like quiet pride. Rourke reached forward on his end to close the call, then paused. "One more thing," he said, and his voice shifted careful in the way it had been at the checkpoint when he'd been about to say something that mattered. "My team pulled Preston's financial accounts this afternoon as part of the asset trace. Something changed today, Gerald. Something that wasn't there this morning." He looked directly at the camera. "I think you need to hear it before tomorrow." My jaw tightened. "Tell me." "Not over the call," Rourke said. "Declan, check your secure message channel. I sent it 20 minutes ago." He looked back at me. "Read it together, then call me back." The screen went dark. Declan pulled his laptop toward him and opened the encrypted messaging app Rourke used for sensitive case communications. I leaned forward in my chair as the message loaded. It was a forwarded bank report, the kind of document that comes from a financial crimes subpoena, dense with account numbers and transaction codes. But the summary at the top was written in plain language, and it took me about 15 seconds to understand what I was reading. My hands went flat against the edge of the table, and I pressed down hard, needing something solid to push against. 6 wire transfers," Declan said, his eyes moving across the screen. His voice had gone very flat, the way voices do when the information is too serious for inflection. "All executed within a 4-hour window today, between 1 and 5 this afternoon." He scrolled down. "Every cent in their joint operating accounts. Every cent in the business account tied to Preston's Charlotte LLC. Transferred through 3 intermediary accounts and landed here." He pointed to a line near the bottom of the report. "A single account, Cayman Islands, registered solely in Preston Elliott Crow's name." "She doesn't know," I said. It wasn't a question. Declan looked at me and gave a single tight nod. "The account is his alone," he said. "Nadine's name is not on it. She has no access, no visibility, no notification rights." He sat back and rubbed the back of his neck with one hand. "Gerald, he's not just planning to survive whatever happens tonight. He's planning to leave, with everything. And she has no idea." Something deeply strange moved through me then. Not sympathy for Nadine, I wasn't capable of that yet, maybe not for a long time. But a kind of cold recognition that the 2 people who had conspired to end my life didn't even trust each other. They had used each other the same way they had tried to use me as a means to an end, disposable the moment something better presented itself. I picked up my phone and called Rourke. He answered on the first ring. "You saw it." "I saw it," I said. "He's getting on a plane." "We believe so," Rourke said. His voice had an edge to it that hadn't been there earlier, the particular tension of a detective who has a window closing on him. "My team pulled his travel records through a federal request this afternoon. He booked a one-way ticket this morning, Asheville Regional to Miami, connecting through Charlotte. Departure 6 a.m. Sunday." I looked at Declan. He had already pulled up a flight search on his laptop, cross-referencing his jaw set and tight. "That's tomorrow morning," I said. 12 hours from now, Rourke confirmed. "Which means we coordinate 2 operations simultaneously. My surveillance team takes the hired crew on the parkway when they move into position, and a separate unit picks up Preston at the airport before his connecting flight boards." A pause. "Nadine gets picked up at the residence at the same time. We do it all at once, so neither of them has the chance to warn the other." The weight of it settled across my shoulders like something physical. 2 operations. My daughter's house at dawn. My son-in-law at an airport gate with a carry-on bag full of everything he'd taken from their shared accounts. "And Nadine truly doesn't know he's leaving," I said. "Based on everything we've collected, no," Rourke said. "She believes this is still a joint plan. She has no idea he's already moved the money out of reach." Another pause, and his voice dropped slightly. "Gerald, this is going to be hard to hear, but when she finds out, and she will find out possibly during the arrest, her first instinct is not going to be remorse. I've worked enough of these cases to tell you that. Don't expect what you're hoping for." My throat tightened. I didn't answer that directly, because he was right. and I didn't want to admit how much I was still hoping for something I probably wasn't going to get. "What do you need from me tonight?" I asked instead. "I need you to go home, act normal, and wait for Nadine to reach out," Rourke said. "She'll want to confirm your plans for tomorrow evening. When she does, give her the wrong information. Calmly, naturally, the way you would if you had nothing to hide. And if she calls before I'm ready, you'll be ready," Rourke said with the quiet certainty of a man who had correctly read people for 25 years. I hung up and looked at Declan across the table. He was watching me with that careful, steady expression, the one he'd worn at the checkpoint, the one that said he understood the weight of what was happening and wasn't going to pretend otherwise. "Go home," he said. "Get a few hours of rest if you can. I'll be monitoring everything from here, the tracker signal, the spoofed feed, the communications channel with Rourke's team." He hesitated. "Gerald, you've done everything right. Every single step." I pushed my chair back and stood up. My knees hurt. My back hurt. I was 68 years old, and I had been running on about 4 hours of sleep and an unquantifiable amount of grief for the past 20 hours, and standing up from a kitchen chair felt like it cost something. "I'll be fine," I said, because that was what I always said, and there was comfort in the habit of it. I walked back across the dark lawn to my own house, went inside, and sat down in the living room armchair, where I did most of my evening reading. The room was quiet. The clock on the mantel ticked. The photograph of Nadine at age 9 was on the bookshelf, directly in my line of sight, gap-toothed grin, pigtails, holding up a fish she'd caught off the Lake Lure dock, like it was the greatest achievement of her life. I looked at that photograph for a long time. Then my phone buzzed on the side table. A text message. "Nadine, Dad, are you still doing the lake drive tomorrow night? Just checking in. Love you." I read it twice. The words, "love you" at the end, so easy, so automatic. The same 2 words she had signed off every text message with, for as long as she had been old enough to send text messages. I picked up the phone. I thought about what Rourke had told me about what Declan had shown me about 6 wire transfers executed between 1 and 5 in the afternoon. I thought about Preston at an airport gate tomorrow morning, with everything they owned in a single offshore account. And then I typed back carefully and calmly the first deliberate lie I had ever told my daughter in 68 years of being her father. "Planning to leave around 9 tomorrow. Taking Route 191 this time. Parkway fog's been bad. Should be a quiet drive. Talk soon. Love you too." I pressed send, set the phone face down on the side table, and sat there in the dark with Margaret's clock ticking on the mantel, and tried very hard not to think about what "love you too" had cost me to type. Sunday morning came in gray and quiet. I had slept maybe 3 hours, not the fitful, nightmare-threaded sleep of a man whose world had collapsed, but a dense, dreamless unconsciousness that my body had simply demanded and taken without asking permission. I woke at 7:15 with the birds going outside the bedroom window and lay still for a full minute, looking at the ceiling, letting the previous 48 hours settle back into place like sediment after a disturbance. Then I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table to prepare the hardest performance of my life. It wasn't a stage. It wasn't a boardroom. It was my own kitchen on a Sunday morning with a mug of coffee going cold beside me while I thought through exactly how a man who didn't know anything would talk to his daughter about his plans for the evening. The phone rang at 10:03. Nadine. I let it ring twice, not from hesitation, but because that was what I always did. I picked up on the 3rd ring. "Morning, sweetheart." My voice came out warm and slightly rough the way it naturally was before the coffee fully kicked in. Not performed, just true enough to be useful. "Morning, Dad." She sounded relaxed, comfortable. The easy warmth of a Sunday morning daughter calling her father. "Did you sleep okay? You sounded tired last night." "Slept fine," I said. "Little stiff, you know how it is." She laughed softly. I worry about you in that big house by yourself. A pause, and in the pause I could hear her organizing herself, deciding how to steer the conversation. So, you're still heading out tonight to the lake. That's the plan, I said. Was thinking I'd leave a little earlier than usual, actually. Maybe 9 instead of the usual late start. Get there before it gets too cold. 9. The note in her voice shifted very slightly, almost imperceptible. But I had been listening to Nadine's voice for 40 years, and I heard the recalibration in it, the way the information landed, and was immediately being processed. That's earlier than you normally go. Thought I'd try it, I said pleasantly. Get a fire going before midnight for once. Old man needs his sleep. I chuckled, actually chuckled, which surprised even me, because 68 years of practice at being composed will occasionally produce something genuine, even in the worst circumstances. Plus, I'm going Route 191 instead of the Parkway. The fog out on the ridge has been something else lately. Route 191. She repeated it back to me in that same natural, conversational tone. And I heard the sound again, faint, quick, unmistakable. The scratch of a pen on paper. She was writing it down. My grip tightened on the coffee mug. I kept my voice exactly the same. It's longer, but the road's better lit. Don't have to worry about deer as much. That's smart, Nadine said. Really smart, actually. I always thought the Parkway was too dark that time of night. Another small pause. Are you taking your phone? You know the signal drops out on that stretch. Always do, I said. And I'll call you when I get there. Same as always. Good. Her voice softened back into daughter mode, warm, easy, fully present. I just like knowing you made it. I know you do, I thought. I know exactly how much you need to know I made it. I'll talk to you tonight, I said. Love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. I set the phone down on the table and pressed both palms flat against the wood surface. My hands were steady. My breathing was controlled. But something inside my chest was pulling apart very slowly, like a seam under too much strain, not tearing, just separating, thread by thread in a way that was quiet and continuous and couldn't be stopped. I sat that way for about 30 seconds. Then I picked up the phone again and called Declan. He answered immediately. I heard. She wrote it down, I said. I heard the pen. I know, I was monitoring the call. A brief pause. Gerald, you were perfect. I mean that. Don't compliment me right now, I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. Just tell me the spoofed signal is running. Active and clean, Declan said. Preston's been checking the tracker feed every 40 minutes since 8 this morning. The signal shows your car in the driveway, normal Saturday activity. Tonight, when you leave, it'll show you heading north on Merriman, then picking up Route 191 just like you told her. It'll follow that route at a natural driving speed all the way to the fork point. He paused. He'll believe every second of it. I exhaled slowly. And Rourke called me 20 minutes ago, Declan said. The truck moved last night, Gerald. After your text to Nadine, 3 individuals, same vehicle that's been on the Parkway, they repositioned to a staging area on Route 191 about 2 miles past the county line. Exactly where you told her you'd be driving. The bait had been taken, hook, line, and everything attached to it. They're in position, I said. They're in position, Declan confirmed. Rourke's team has eyes on them. Camera coverage on 3 approach points. The moment that truck moves to block the road tonight, they have probable cause for the arrest. I stood up from the kitchen table and walked down the hallway to my office. I opened the top drawer of my desk and took out the folder I kept there, 40 years of property records, the original deeds and survey maps and closing documents from every piece of land Margaret and I had ever bought together. The first one at the bottom of the stack was a single yellowed page from 1983, a quarter-acre lot in West Asheville that had cost us $11,000 and felt like an impossible commitment at the time. I sat down in my desk chair and held that page in both hands. 40 years. Every early morning and late night, and difficult negotiation and careful decision had gone into what was in this folder. Margaret's handwriting was on 6 of the page's notes in the margins questions she'd wanted to ask before signing. Her handwriting was small and precise, and I had not been able to look at it directly for 4 years without my eyes going hot. I looked at it now. Let it hurt the way it needed to. I promised you, I said quietly to the empty room. I'm keeping it. I checked the clock on the computer screen. 3:07 in the afternoon. 6 hours and 53 minutes until I was supposed to leave. 6 hours and 53 minutes before the trap closed. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk and reached to the back past the spare reading glasses and the expired insurance cards and found what I was looking for. A small framed photograph 4 inches by 6 in a simple silver frame that Nadine had given us the Christmas before Margaret got sick. Our wedding photo. Margaret and me on the steps of the First Baptist Church on Merriman Avenue, October 4th, 1986, 39 years ago yesterday. She was laughing in the picture, not posed, not arranged, genuinely laughing at something I had just said. Her head tilted slightly back, her bouquet of white dahlias held loosely in one hand. I was looking at her the way I had looked at her for the next 35 years, without ever getting tired of it. I held the frame for a moment. Then I turned it face down on the desk very gently and left it there. Not because I couldn't bear to look, but because some things deserved to be protected from what was coming next. And Margaret's laugh, the real one, the one caught in that photograph on October 4th, 1986, was one of them. At 8:45 on Sunday evening, I put on my jacket, picked up my keys, and walked out to my car. The night air hit me clean and cold, the way October nights do in the mountains, when the temperature drops fast after sunset. The driveway was lit by the porch light and the pale glow of the street lamp at the end of the block. Everything looked exactly the way it always did on a Friday night or a Sunday night, as the case was when I headed out to the lake. Same car, same jacket, same keys in my right hand. The only difference was the small wireless earpiece Declan had given me an hour earlier, sitting snug in my left ear, connected to a secure channel he and Rourke had set up for the night. You're live, Declan's voice said, quiet and clear. Signal's clean. How are you feeling? Like a 68-year-old man about to drive around Asheville for 2 hours while other people do the dangerous work, I said. Which is exactly how you want me to feel. A soft exhale that might have been a laugh. Tracker signal is broadcasting your position as stationary in the driveway. The moment you pull out, I'll activate the spoofed feed on Route 191. Preston's phone should pick up the signal change within 2 minutes. He's watching. He's been watching since 7:30, Declan said. Checked the feed 3 times in the last hour. I got into the car. Sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel, looking through the windshield at the quiet suburban street. 2 houses down, the Hendersons had their porch lights on. Across the street, the lamp in Declan's front window burned steady. Normal. Ordinary. A Sunday night in a neighborhood where people went to bed at 10 and worried about leaf blowers and property taxes. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. Moving, I said quietly. Copy, Declan said. Spoof is active. Drive safe, Gerald. I took Elk Mountain Road west, away from the parkway, away from Route 191, away from everything happening on the eastern side of the county. The road wound through the dark in gentle curves, well lit compared to the parkway neighborhoods on both sides, giving way gradually to open hillside. I drove at exactly the speed limit, not too slow, not too fast. The kind of driving you do when you're old and careful and have nowhere to be in a hurry. In my left ear, Rourke's voice came through at 9:14. Units are in position. Truck is still at the staging area. Preston's feed shows your vehicle at the Route 191 junction. A pause. He's buying it. My hands tightened briefly on the wheel. I loosened them deliberately. Good, I said. The next 20 minutes were the strangest of my life. I drove through neighborhoods I had lived near for 30 years, past the grocery store, where Margaret and I had done our Saturday shopping, for decades past the park, where I had pushed Nadine on the swings when she was 4 years old. The city moved past my windows, calm and indifferent, while on the other side of Asheville, everything I had spent 4 days building was about to either hold or fall apart. At 9:31, Rourke's voice sharpened. "Truck is moving. They're pulling onto Route 191 southbound." A beat. Speed consistent with approach to blocking position. Approximately 90 seconds to the target point. I pulled into the parking lot of a shopping center on the west side and stopped the car. Cut the engine. In the sudden quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. 30 seconds, Rourke said. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, even though the car wasn't moving. The parking lot was empty except for a couple of vehicles near the far end. The overhead lights buzzed. A shopping cart sat alone in the middle of the lot, drifting slightly in the wind. "They're in position," Rourke said. "Truck across the road. 2 individuals on foot moving to flank positions." His voice stayed level, controlled the voice of a man who had done this before. "Units moving in." Then in my ear, a different quality of sound, distant, compressed the sounds of an operation in progress. Lights, commands, the precise controlled chaos of a planned arrest. 43 seconds. 3 in custody, Rourke said. Route 191, clean takedown, no injuries. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment. Just one breath in, one breath out. "Clean," I repeated. "Clean," Rourke confirmed. "Gerald, it worked. Now I need you to stay where you are. Don't go home yet. We're moving to Phase 2. Phase 2. Preston at the airport. Nadine at the house." I opened my eyes and looked out at the parking lot, at the lonely shopping cart still drifting in the wind. My chest felt hollowed out, not from relief, not yet, but from the particular exhaustion that comes when something you have been holding up with sheer force of will is finally being held up by someone else. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. It was 9:58 when Rourke came back on the line. His voice had a different quality now, not the operational tension of before, but something more careful. "Gerald, Nadine called the county non-emergency line 40 minutes ago. I went very still. She reported you as a missing person," Rourke said. "Said you left for the lake house at 9 and she hadn't been able to reach you. Asked if there were any accidents on the parkway." He paused. "She's establishing an alibi. She wants it on record that she was worried about you." My jaw clenched so hard my back teeth ached. I picked up my phone from the center console. 3 missed calls. Nadine. The timestamps read 9:12, 9:29, and 9:44, perfectly spaced. Not the calls of a daughter who was genuinely frightened. The calls of a woman building a timeline. I set the phone back down without returning any of them. "I know," I said, and my voice came out so flat and so steady that it frightened me a little. "Let her build it. It won't hold." I didn't go to the airport. Rourke had been clear about that on Sunday night, when I finally drove home from the shopping center parking lot. Stay home, stay off the road, stay available by phone. I was a cooperating witness, not law enforcement, and showing up at an active arrest scene was the kind of thing that created complications nobody needed. So I went home, sat in the kitchen armchair, and waited. I didn't sleep. I didn't try to. I made coffee at 3 in the morning and sat with it at the kitchen table in the dark, listening to the house settle around me, the way old houses do in the cold, small pops and sighs in the walls, the radiator clicking on in the back hallway. The clock on the mantel moved through 4 o'clock, and then 5, and somewhere between 4:45 and 5:15, the sky outside the kitchen window began shifting from black to the particular deep blue that precedes dawn. My phone rang at 6:03. I had it in my hand before the second ring. "It's done," Rourke said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the particular quality of exhaustion that comes from a night of operational work, not tired in the body, so much as compressed, like a man who has been holding himself at a high level of precision for too many hours. Preston Crow was taken into custody at 5:47 this morning at Asheville Regional, Gate C connecting flight to Charlotte. I pressed my free hand flat against the kitchen table. How did he react? Initially uncooperative, Rourke said. Told the arresting officers it was a misunderstanding, that he had a business meeting in Miami, that his attorney would have this resolved by noon. A brief pause. He stopped talking the moment they showed him the warrant. Went completely quiet. Looked down at his shoes and didn't say another word. The image of that landed somewhere deep and painful. Preston Crow, who had sat at my kitchen table 100 times and called me Gerald and clapped me on the shoulder and looked me in the eye while tracking every mile I drove for 3 months, standing at an airport gate with his carry-on bag looking down at his shoes. And Nadine, my voice came out rough on her name, taken into custody at her residence at 5:52, Rourke said. 5 minutes after Preston. We coordinated the timing specifically so neither of them could warn the other. He stopped. She was asleep when the team arrived, Gerald. She had no idea Preston wasn't in the house. My throat tightened viciously. I swallowed against it. She didn't know he was gone, I said. She thought he was in the bedroom, Rourke confirmed. When the officers came through the door and she realized he wasn't there, her first question was where he was. Her second question. He paused, and something in the pause told me what was coming. Her second question was whether his accounts had been frozen. The kitchen felt very small suddenly. I pushed my chair back slightly, needing air that wasn't going to come from anywhere in that room. Not where is he, not is he okay? I said. Whether his accounts were frozen. That's correct, Rourke said. Flat. Honest. The way he always delivered things that were hard. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window. The sky was going pale gold over the eastern ridge, the first clean light of Monday morning, cutting through the gaps in the tree line. A beautiful morning objectively. The kind Margaret would have made me come look at. There's something else, Rourke said. My financial crimes team worked through the night on the account records. Gerald, the wire transfer that funded the hired group. The payment that went to the contractor network Preston used to arrange everything. He stopped. Let the weight of what he was about to say settle into the space between us. It didn't come from Preston's account. It didn't come from their joint account. It came from a personal account held solely in Nadine's name, an account Preston didn't have access to. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. She paid for it herself, I said. $240,000, Rourke said quietly. Transferred in 3 installments over 6 weeks. The account had been accumulating funds for approximately 3 years. He let that number sit. We believe this is money she diverted separately, independent of Preston, independent of the joint finances. 3 years. While she had been calling me every Sunday morning and bringing pastries and asking about my furnace and holding my hand across the kitchen table and saying, "Love you, Dad," she had been quietly, patiently, methodically setting aside the money to have me killed. Something cracked open in the center of my chest, not grief exactly, not anger exactly, but the particular devastation of a man who has just understood how thoroughly and how long he has been deceived. I pressed both palms flat on my thighs and breathed until it receded to something I could manage. Gerald. Rourke's voice was different now, softer than I had heard it. I need you to hear what I'm about to say, and I need you to believe it's true, not just something I'm telling you to be kind. He waited until I made a sound that meant I was listening. None of this is your fault. Not a single part of it. You trusted your daughter because you raised her and loved her and had every reason to. What she chose to do with that trust, that is entirely on her, not you. My jaw was working. My chest felt like something had taken up residence in it that was too large for the space available. I breathed through my nose, slow and deliberate, the way Margaret had taught me to do when I was angry enough to say things I couldn't take back. "Thank you," I said when I could say anything at all. "We're not done yet," Rourke said, and his voice returned to its working register, precise, forward-moving. "The search team at Nadine's residence found something this morning that Franklin needs to see in person. I've already called him. He's heading to your house now." A pause. "He said to tell you to put on a fresh pot of coffee." His words. Despite everything, the sleepless night, the burning behind my eyes, the grief sitting like a stone at the bottom of my chest, I almost smiled at that. Franklin Okafor requesting coffee at 6 in the morning in the middle of a criminal investigation was so completely, perfectly Franklin that it cracked something open in me that wasn't entirely painful. "I'll put the coffee on," I said. "Good," Rourke said. "Gerald, you did the right thing. Every step of the way. I want you to remember that when the hard parts come." I stood at the kitchen window after he hung up, watching the morning light spread across the Blue Ridge. The same mountains I had driven toward every Friday night for 11 years. The same sky Margaret had pointed at from this exact window on 100 mornings exactly like this one. 20 minutes later, a car pulled into my driveway. Franklin right on time in his gray coat with his briefcase and the expression of a man who had seen the worst and was prepared to deal with it methodically and without flinching. I opened the door before he knocked. "Coffee's ready," I said. He stepped inside, set his briefcase on the kitchen table, and looked at me with the steady, unsparing attention of a 19-year friendship. "Gerald," he said, "we need to talk about what they found at Nadine's house." He opened the briefcase and set a folder on the table between us. His face was grave in a way that went all the way down. "Because what's in here doesn't just change the evidence. It changes the entire timeline of everything she's been planning." My hand went to the back of the kitchen chair closest to me. I gripped it hard. "Show me," I said. Franklin opened the folder and placed 2 documents side by side on my kitchen table. They looked identical at first glance. Same formatting, same font, same page length. Both labeled Last Will and Testament of Gerald Andrew Whitmore. At the top, both dated October 14, 2019, the year I had first formalized my estate plan with Franklin's help. "Look at page 7, Franklin said, pointing to the document on the right. His voice was controlled, but the set of his jaw told me everything about what he thought of what he was about to show me. I leaned forward and read. Page 7 of the document on the left. The original, the one I had signed and kept in my safe read as it always had. A standard distribution clause splitting the estate between charitable trust, fixed annual disbursements, and a residual fund for ongoing property management. Page 7 of the document on the right said something different. The primary beneficiary shall have sole discretionary authority over all trust assets with no restrictions on liquidation, transfer, or disbursement. My stomach turned. Page 12, Franklin said. I moved to page 12. In the original, a full paragraph dedicated the Lake Lure property to a conservation easement. Margaret's wish, something she had asked for, specifically, something I had honored without question. In the copy, that paragraph was gone, replaced with 2 sentences that transferred the property outright to the primary beneficiary with no conditions attached. Page 19, Franklin said, and his voice was quieter now. Page 19 in the original split the estate across multiple beneficiaries and charitable organizations. Page 19 in the copy said one thing. 100% of the residual estate shall pass to the sole primary beneficiary, Nadine Marie Whitmore Crowe. I sat back in my chair. My hands were flat on the table in front of me, and I focused on keeping them that way, flat, still controlled, because the alternative was something I was not willing to do at my own kitchen table at 6:30 in the morning. She wasn't looking for the original to read it, I said. My voice sounded far away. She was going to swap it out, put this version in the safe and destroy mine. Franklin nodded just once. If this version had been in that safe when you died, regardless of the trust amendment we filed 3 months ago, her attorneys would have argued the original will superseded the amendment, particularly if they could demonstrate any irregularities in the amendment process. It would have triggered years of litigation. He paused. She may not have won, but she would have created enough legal chaos to tie up the estate while she accessed what she could. I thought about the 3 visits on the security camera footage. 14 minutes the first time, 38 minutes the second. The flashlight on the 3rd visit running along the underside of my desk. She just needed to find the safe, I said. And the combination, Franklin said, which she never got. The combination was Margaret's birthday. September 3rd, 1958. The only number I had never written down anywhere, because it was the only number I was certain I would never forget for as long as I lived. I turned away from the window. My throat had closed down to almost nothing, and I stood with my back to the room for a moment, breathing slowly until I trusted myself to speak again. Where was this printed? I asked, because focusing on the practical was the only thing keeping me functional. Franklin tapped a second sheet he had placed beneath the documents. A print shop on Elk Mountain Scenic Highway. The search team found the receipt in Nadine's home office. The order was placed 2 months ago, paid for through a business account. He pointed to the business name on the receipt. Meridian Property Analytics, LLC. The same shell company as the GPS tracker. Both of them, I said. Registered to both of them jointly, Franklin confirmed. The tracker, the print order both run through the same entity. He looked at me steadily. Gerald, this connects Preston to the document fraud, as well as the physical surveillance. They were working together on every layer of this. I looked at the 2 wills lying side by side on my kitchen table. The one I had signed. The one my daughter had commissioned to replace it. What happens to this now? I asked. It becomes part of the criminal evidence package, Franklin said. Document fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft by deception. Combined with everything else, he stopped, picked up both documents and aligned them carefully back into the folder. They're not getting out of this, Gerald. Not either of them. I nodded. Wrapped both hands around my coffee mug even though it had gone cold. Franklin, I said. The Lake Lure property, the conservation easement Margaret wanted. My voice cracked on her name just slightly. That stays regardless of all of this. Franklin's expression softened for the first time all morning. It stays, he said firmly. It was properly documented in the amendment, and it will be honored. Margaret's wishes are protected. Something loosened in my chest that had been pulled tight for 4 days. Good, I said. That's the only thing that matters. Franklin closed the briefcase and looked at me across the table. Rourke called me before I came over. He wants you at the precinct this afternoon if you're willing. 2 o'clock. He paused. Nadine is being held there pending arraignment. He thought you might want to observe the interview. My jaw tightened. Every part of me wanted to say no. I'll be there, I said. Rourke met me at the entrance of the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office at 1:58 in the afternoon. He looked like a man who had been awake for 30 hours, which he had, but carried it the way experienced detectives do through posture and focus rather than energy. He shook my hand, held it a beat longer than necessary, and said nothing about how I looked, which I appreciated. She's been in interview room 2 since noon, he said as we walked through the corridor. Her attorney arrived at 10. They've been talking privately for most of the morning. He pushed through a set of double doors into a quieter hallway. She knows about the document fraud. She knows about the tracker. She knows about the wire transfers from her personal account. He stopped outside a door with a narrow reinforced window. What she doesn't know yet is what I'm about to tell her in the next 10 minutes. That Preston took the money, I said. That Preston took everything, Rourke confirmed. And that he was at an airport gate with a one-way ticket while she was asleep in their house. He looked at me steadily. You don't have to watch this. I want you to know that. I know, I said. I'm watching. He pushed open the observation room door. The room on the other side of the glass was small and institutional fluorescent lighting, a metal table, 2 chairs. Nadine sat in the far chair, with her back mostly to the window. I could see her profile. She was wearing the same clothes she'd been arrested in, dark pajamas, and a cardigan someone had let her put on her hair, pulled back in a loose knot. Without makeup, without the composed, warm presentation she wore like a second skin, she looked younger than I expected, and harder. Her attorney, a woman in her 40s in a charcoal suit, sat beside her with a legal pad. The interviewing detective, a compact man named Yates, who Rourke had introduced briefly in the hallway, came through the door and sat across the table. He set a thin folder down without opening it. "Ms. Whitmore Crowe," he said, "I want to update you on some developments from this morning." Nadine's chin lifted slightly. "My client has already indicated she won't be answering questions without—" "I'm not asking questions," Yates said pleasantly. "I'm providing information. Your client is free to listen." A beat. The attorney nodded once. "Preston Crowe was taken into custody at 5:47 this morning at Asheville Regional Airport," Yates said. "He was attempting to board a connecting flight to Miami. One way." He opened the folder. In the 24 hours preceding his arrest, he executed 6 wire transfers, totaling approximately $800,000 from accounts held jointly with your client, as well as from a business account, in his name to a private offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He looked up. "That account is registered solely to Preston Crowe. Your client's name does not appear on it, and she has no access to those funds." The silence in the room stretched like something physical. Nadine's head turned very slightly. I could see the muscles in her jaw working. Then she exhaled through her nose a sharp, furious sound and leaned forward with her elbows on the table and both hands pressed together in front of her mouth. "How much?" she said, and her voice was low and tight, with a fury that had nothing to do with remorse and everything to do with the particular rage of a person who has been outmaneuvered. "Approximately $800,000, Yates repeated calmly. "The Charlotte account," she said to her attorney, turning sharply. "Is there anything left in the—" "Ms. Whitmore Crowe," her attorney said, putting a firm hand on her arm. "Stop talking." But I had already heard enough. Standing behind that glass, I felt something move through me that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite anger, something older and more tired than either. I had stood in that kitchen 48 hours ago and watched my daughter hold my hand across the table with warm fingers and say, "I love you, Dad," and ask about my furnace. And the first thing she had said, when she found out her husband had run with their money, was to ask about the accounts. Not where is he? Not is he safe? Not even how could he? The accounts. Rourke was standing beside me. He didn't say anything, but I felt him shift slightly, the small movement of a man who was watching me and making sure I was still upright. "She's not sorry," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Not even a little." "No," Rourke said quietly. "She's not." In the room, Nadine had pulled herself back into some semblance of composure, her attorney's hand still on her arm. Yates was saying something about arraignment timelines. Nadine's face had closed off, tight controlled, focused on whatever angle her legal mind was calculating. I turned away from the glass. The hallway outside the observation room was empty. Long, fluorescent, institutional. I walked to the far end of it and stood with one hand on the wall and breathed slowly and deliberately until the burning behind my eyes receded to something manageable. Rourke followed me out, unhurried. "Gerald," he said, "there's one more thing. About the shell company registration, Meridian Property Analytics." He stopped beside me. "When my team ran the full corporate history this morning, they found the initial registration documents." His voice was careful now, the way it got when information was about to land hard. "The company was originally set up 3 years ago, before Nadine met Preston." I turned to look at him. "It was hers first," Rourke said. "Preston was added to the registration 14 months ago, but the entity, the structure, the initial accounts, the framework, Nadine built that herself, before Preston was ever in the picture." The wall was cold under my hand. I pressed against it harder. "It was always her plan," I said. "It appears that way," Rourke said. "Preston was a useful addition, but the foundation was hers." He held my gaze. I thought you needed to know before tomorrow. The fluorescent lights in the courthouse hallway buzzed low and indifferent, the kind that couldn't care less whose life was unraveling beneath them. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4, hands pressed flat against my thighs, trying to keep them steady. They weren't entirely cooperating. Franklin sat beside me in his charcoal suit leather folder on one knee. 11 years, my attorney. He had drafted Margaret's estate documents. He had sat beside me the day we buried her. Now he was sitting beside me, waiting to watch my only daughter answer to a grand jury's indictment. You don't have to go in, he said quietly. I'm going in, I told him. He studied my face, gave a single nod, and didn't argue. Nadine was already seated at the defense table when we entered. Navy blazer, dark hair, pulled back tight. She looked thinner than when I had last seen her through the one-way glass 6 days ago, asking about the Charlotte account, before the handcuffs were even off her wrists. When I walked through those doors, she found my face immediately. Her eyes filled and her lower lip trembled the way it used to when she was 7 and had broken something she wasn't supposed to touch. My chest tightened so sharply I had to breathe through it. The hearing moved quickly through procedural filings and chain of custody confirmations. Then ADA Lorraine Voss stood and asked the court to admit State's Exhibit 14, a notarized asset authorization document granting full discretionary authority over the Whitmore family real estate holdings valued at $4.2 million. The document bore a forged version of my signature. It had been rejected by the notary after a verification flag, but a second clean copy had been found at Nadine's residence unsigned with a single blank line waiting. My hands gripped the bench so hard the wood bit into my palms. One signature line. One more visit with soup and paperwork and a warm smile. That was all she had needed. She never got that signature, Franklin murmured. That's why the plan accelerated to the accident. I know, I said. My voice barely made it out. The moment that broke something open came at 11:15 a.m. when Detective Rourke walked through the financial audit. Preston had transferred $812,000 across 6 transactions, all routed to a Cayman Islands account registered solely in his name. Not Nadine's. His alone. I watched her face change when she understood. He didn't put my name on it. Her voice cracked loud enough for half the gallery to hear. $800,000, and he wasn't going to take me with him. The judge silenced her. Nadine pressed both hands over her face, her whole body shaking with a sob she couldn't contain. I had expected satisfaction. Instead, I felt a grief so old and heavy it had no name. She had planned to take everything from me, and the man she trusted had planned to take everything from her. After the recess, her attorney found me in the gallery. My client wants a private meeting before sentencing, she said. She has things she needs to say to you directly. I turned it over carefully. Tell her yes, I said. Tell her I'll be there. Franklin touched my arm. Gerald, you don't have to. I know, I said. I want to look her in the eye one more time before this ends. I walked out into the pale October light, knees unsteady, eyes burning with a grief too large to actually cry. 68 years had taught me one thing. The hardest conversations are always the ones worth having. Winter had come early to Asheville that year. The Blue Ridge sat buried under gray cloud. The mountains invisible, the courthouse parking lot, salted white with frost that hadn't decided to melt. I arrived 40 minutes early, engine off, black coffee, going cold in my hand, watching the courthouse lights come on one by one. My meeting with Nadine had happened 11 days before a small conference room, a corrections officer at the door, a table between us. She walked in without makeup, her hair loose, wearing a gray facility uniform. For the first time in years, she looked like the girl who used to press her face against my shoulder during thunderstorms and say, "Make it stop, Daddy." My throat closed the moment I saw her. I don't know where to start, she said. Start with the truth, I told her. We've got time. She cried from almost the first sentence, not the courtroom performance I had watched before, but something uglier and more honest. She told me that somewhere between the debt and the desperation, she had stopped seeing me as her father and started seeing me as an obstacle. She said that word herself. "It wasn't you," she said, her voice wrecked, tears falling freely. "It was what I became when I was afraid." I reached across the table and covered her shaking hands with mine. "I know," I said quietly. "But knowing doesn't fix what you were going to do." She pressed her forehead to our joined hands and wept until her whole body heaved. I sat with a pain in my chest so enormous, I wondered if a man my age could survive the specific weight of it. I left without another word, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had decided the last words between us would be spoken where they counted most. In the courtroom, Nadine stood to face me before sentencing. Her chin trembled. Her voice broke on a single word, "Dad." She said she was sorry, that she knew she didn't deserve forgiveness, that I was the only person left who, her voice gave out entirely. I stood. I read my statement without looking at the page, because I had memorized every word at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning. I loved my daughter completely and without condition. What she chose to do with that love is the answer to every question about who she became. I have only one question left for her. Nadine, are you sorry for what you did to me? Or are you sorry it didn't work? She looked at me, her face crumpling, her mouth opening, and then she shook her head and looked down at the table. That was her answer. Outside, Declan fell into step beside me. The frost crunched under our shoes. The mountains were still hidden. "You all right?" he asked. I considered it honestly. "No," I said, "but I will be." He nodded. He understood the difference. I drove home past Margaret's favorite bakery, past Elk Mountain Road, past every place this city had kept her memory alive. I pulled into my driveway, reached into the glove compartment, and took out her photograph, laughing Lake Lure behind her, the mountains green and untroubled. "I handled it," I said to her. "Your house is safe." The afternoon light came through the windshield, thin and clean. I went inside. People ask me sometimes why I didn't fall apart. 68 years old, sitting in that courtroom, watching the only child I had left get sentenced to 8 years. They expect me to say I was strong. I wasn't strong. I was just still standing. I believe God doesn't give you more than you can carry, but I also believe He never promised the load would feel light. Here is what I learned from my own story, and I say this as a man who almost didn't survive. Don't do what I did. Don't wait until the cracks in your family have grown into canyons before you pay attention. Don't confuse someone's presence with their loyalty. Love is not the same thing as trust, and the hardest lesson of my life was learning the difference between the two far too late and far too painfully. My personal opinion, greed doesn't just destroy the person who carries it. It destroys everyone standing close enough to care about them. I had 40 years of memories with my daughter. 40 years. And in the end, she looked at me in that courtroom and couldn't answer a simple question. That tells you everything you need to know about what greed does to a soul. These are the grandpa stories. Nobody warns you about the family story that doesn't end with a holiday dinner and everyone laughing. Real grandpa stories carry weight. Real family story moments can break you open. Every honest family story begins with love, and sometimes, God help us, ends in a courtroom. If something in this story touched you, left you thinking, or reminded you of someone you love, drop it in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Thank you genuinely from the bottom of this old man's heart for staying with me all the way to the end. And one last thing, the stories ahead contain some fictional elements crafted purely for reflection and storytelling purposes. If that's not the kind of content you're looking for, no hard feelings, step away and find what fits you best. But if you're staying, I'm glad you're here.